Welcome, guys, to another episode of Reach Your Peak podcast with your host, Bobby Enright. And today's show, we're going to speak about carbohydrates and the importance of carbohydrates around intense exercise. So what we need to understand about this is that if you're a person that does intense exercise, that could be somebody that goes to the gym, and again, it's an intense session. You're training really hard. There's a high level of neural drive there. If you're a field sport athlete, somebody maybe plays Gaelic football, for instance, and you're getting back in season now, getting back training, and you've got an intensive couple of weeks coming up in terms of your training, from matches to field training, you're going to be requiring a certain amount of carbohydrates. But the first thing I suppose we need to look at is we basically need to look at the kind of most important factors, and the most important factors are going to be, obviously, number one is going to be calories, the amount of calories you bring into your body on a daily basis. So that's what we would class as energy balance. The next thing is going to be your macros, how much your fats, proteins and carbs you're bringing into your diet on a daily basis to make up the energy balance. And then we've got our micros, which would be next. That's our vitamins and minerals, and we're ensuring we're getting adequate amount of all our spectrum of vitamins and minerals. And then the next thing is going to be meal timing and frequency around your sport. So what we need to look at, where we would look at somebody that would require a higher carbohydrate intake, would be somebody that is doing intense physical exercise. So like I said, resistance training in the gym, or doing something like a field sport. And also the next thing we would be required, they're frequently doing this. So training 3 to 5 times per week would be frequent exercise at high intensity, and these people who would require a lot more carbohydrates would be a person that would have a high level of fitness, of aerobic fitness, and then would also have a kind of a lower level of body fat. That would be a person that we would require to have a lot more carbohydrates within their training window than somebody that would have, we'll say, a lower activity level. They would have lower levels of physical fitness, and they would have a higher level of body fat, stored body fat. So what we want to look at here is we want to look at, okay, if we're coming into a match, the most important thing when it comes to carbohydrate training is its impact on anabolism. And basically what I mean by that is it's going to impact performance, it's going to impact recovery. And there's two main reasons that we have to look at when we look at carbohydrates. We want to make sure we've adequate carbohydrates in the system to support the training that we're going to do. So if I'm dealing with somebody as a coach and they come to me and they're a little bit of a leaner individual, what's going to be important for that person is going to be that they are going to need an adequate amount of carbohydrates, because their body is a lot leaner. They don't carry as much stored energy like body fat. So the potential here is there could be a small bit of muscle breakdown if there isn't enough carbohydrates coming in. So it'd be very important for that person. So a leaner individual would possibly carry intra carbohydrates into a game situation or into a gym setting when they're going for an intense workout. So what I would suggest there is, when you look at carbohydrates, you're looking at maybe something like an intra carbohydrate, so something like a citraldextrin, or something like a carbohydrate based powder, and having a small amount of EAs in there as well. So you're getting in that kind of your valine, your isovaline and leucine content coming in, kind of your 3 essential amino acids as well with that carbohydrate. So that would be really important, because then there's readily available carbohydrates for that person. If they run low on their carbohydrate stores, the body is also going to pull from the carbohydrates that's readily available in the bloodstream. So this is really, really important when it comes to intra timing of carbohydrates. That's in the session is really important. For that person, we might look at a pre-carbohydrate feeding window, maybe somewhere around 60 to 80 grams of carbs pre, and then we might go for another 25 to 50 grams of carbs intra, and then a bit of a replenishment meal with some carbohydrates post as well. Again, look at the aspects here, guys. We're talking about a lean individual, high level of fitness, and trains intensively frequently over the week. Again, the leanness is important that you understand that person will require, there's not as much stored body fat, so the potential for them to break down lean tissue in their session is higher. So we're negating that as such by having readily available carbohydrates there to use as energy through that process of them training. Then we look at the next situation where we've got somebody with a higher level of body fat, not a super high level of fitness, and wouldn't train as frequently. So their body's ability to need extra carbohydrates isn't as much as somebody that's leaner, because there is stored body fat there. Remember, they have higher levels of body fat, so they have plenty stored energy there that they can work off of. So the requirement for intra carbs there isn't as important. We probably would look at a game or training session carbohydrate, and then we would look at post. Intra, not as important, because the body has plenty stored energy. Remember, it's not going to start to break down muscle and lean tissue in the session. It's going to be pulling from fat stores, is what that person will want, because they will want to bring their body composition into a better place, and then in time their aerobic fitness and their fitness level will go up as they get lighter and stronger from their resistance training or their field sport or whatever they're doing. So when we look at the importance of carbohydrates here, the really important kind of figures you need to understand is, when you're looking at an anabolic response, can be increased if we co-ingest a low dose of EAs with carbohydrates. Remember, or if for the person that we want to add in carbohydrates, that person that's leaner, we would look at a low dose of EAs with some carbohydrate powder, and that's going to really help the anabolic response. So it's really going to think of anabolic as in the body is anabolic. It's going to start to eat away at lean tissue, which is not what we want. So we want to negate that. So we add a low dosing of EAs and some carbohydrates. Now, the important question to answer here for everybody is, how much carbohydrates should I have? Again, we're looking at something between 3 to 7 grams of carbohydrates per kilo of body weight per day. That's kind of where you want to go. Now, the most important thing, guys, when we talk about energy and energy balance, and we talk about meal timings, the really important thing is the overall consumption for the day, because we need to get in adequate amount of energy. So at the very start, we spoke about energy balance. That's going to be a breakdown of how much protein we're taking in, how much carbohydrate we're taking in, and how much fat we're taking in. If you're a leaner individual, again, we're going to set your protein targets. It could be somewhere around 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. Could be a very good starting point. Again, it's very individual for male to female. It could be a slight bit higher for a male. It could be a slight bit lower for a female. And even with a female, it could be a little bit higher as well. It just depends on the person and what the body composition is like. But if we can go for a female between 1.4 and 1.8 to 2 grams, and if we can go from a male from 1.8 to 2.5 to 3 grams per kilo of body weight. But it's all dependent. But the requirement for somebody in a field sport, 2 grams per kilo body weight, is absolutely fine. Carbohydrates then need to be our dominant fuel source there. So we're going to have at least 20% of remaining calories from fats, and we're going to have the rest coming from carbohydrates. And again, we preference days that you possibly are doing your high intensity. You're going to keep your carbohydrates up. The days you're doing rest days where you're not doing as much intensity, we might bring carbohydrates down and bring fats up a little bit. But it all depends, very individual to the person. But for the topic in this podcast, I want you to really think about, okay, what do I do when it comes to, say, for instance, now we're going into the season where field sports is coming back. People are starting to train. What can I do? So the most important thing is look at yourself individually first, see where you are, what's your body composition like, what's your body percentage fat like, whereabouts are you? Are you somebody that's, for a male, for instance, that's carrying maybe upwards of 20-25% body fat, so you are in that higher body fat level? Or are you somebody that has below 20% body fat, maybe closer to the 15% body fat? You're going to be in that leaner level. So if you're at that leaner level, you'll require more carbohydrates intra-workout, pre-workout and post-workout. And then if you're a person that carries that higher body fat percentage, you're going to need less carbohydrates intra. So it's really important that you understand that when it comes to meal timing, especially around games, around training sessions, and when it comes to how much carbohydrates should you be taking in. And again, if you work off the preference of 5 grams, say let's take a middle figure here, 5 grams per kilo of body weight of carbohydrates. So we simply make an equation there, and we look and we say, right, if the person weighs, for instance, 70 kilos, and we're taking in 5 grams per kilo body weight, we multiply that by 5, we're going to be taking in about 350 grams of carbohydrates. So you could work off that, see how your energy expenditure is, see how your recovery is, see how your body is performing day in, day out in your training sessions, and you can increase or decrease dependent on the person. And again, if you work off that kind of figure, guys, between 3 grams per kilo body weight to 7 grams per kilo body weight, and you can play around with that. The most important thing to think about is that if you have your meal timing done properly through the day, so you're getting adequate amounts of carbohydrates and proteins through the day, and you've spread your fats through the day. You might get up in the morning, for instance, have some oats for breakfast with a little bit of protein and maybe a little bit of peanut butter for a little bit of fat. Then you might go to your next meal and you might add in some rice in there with some nice lean protein like chicken or something like that, and a little bit of vegetables. And then we've got our game in the evening, so we might do a snacking prior to the game. We might maybe look at some fruit and a little bit of protein, and then we go into the game. We might set up our intra game carbohydrates with about 1.5 liters of water. We might put in 50 grams of carbohydrate powder, 10 gram scoop of EAAs, and then that could be your intra game time water. And again, you could even go 1.5 liters to 2 liters dependent. And then from there, you're going to post game. You might go for a bit of a lean meat again, might go for a bit of steak, and you might go for some sweet potato and some vegetables, and maybe a little, and you're getting plenty fats from the steak. And again, that would be a very good structured day where you're getting in nice lean proteins, good quality carbohydrates that are going to digest well in your body. And make sure, guys, when you're looking at carbohydrate timing around your games and stuff like that, don't be adding in carbohydrates that you haven't used before. You need to make sure that your body's digesting them well, you're feeling good, your performance is good, you're not bloated, you're not gassy, your bowel movement is in the right place. Because the important thing is that you want the carbohydrates that you're ingesting to be used as fuel and want to feel very, very good using these. Now, somebody that's not as lean as this person, and maybe they've higher percentage body fat, you could carry with the same meal structure, but you could leave out the intra carbohydrates. You might need as much a simple drink like an isotonic drink that would have some carbohydrates in it, just a little bit, and some electrolytes in it for hydration. It would be absolutely adequate for you in terms of a training session. Again, you can add in a little bit of carbohydrates if needed, but with the higher percentage body fat, it isn't really necessary, because again, we're adding in carbohydrates to make sure we're not breaking down lean tissue. And if you're carrying high levels of body fat, you're not breaking down lean tissue as such, because there's plenty stored energy there. So when it comes to carbohydrate timing around sports, guys, that's the kind of way you have to think and kind of look at it that way and say to yourself, okay, how do I feel? And again, when you look at carbohydrate timing, you have to look at your biofeedback. You have to look at what your body is feeling like. What is your recovery like? What's your sleep like? What was the performance like? And if you've got coaches on the sideline, especially in field sports, they're watching your performance from game to game, so you can see if there's a decline in performance, if you're finding you're just a bit lethargic on your first step, if you're finding that your strength and power is just not there the same, then you can start to increase carbohydrates a little bit. Maybe you can start to look at your other biofeedback markers, like your sleep, your routine at night, your routine in the morning, the foods you're taking in as well. And again, it's just playing with that little equation until you get the right formula for you and your carbohydrate timing around your sport. When it comes to somebody that's in the gym, then it's going to be relevant as well, because depending on the length of the session, we're going to be very alactic when we train in the gym. It's very explosive and very fast. So we're going to have the creatine phosphate energy system there. So we would potentially bring in some creatine, say 5 grams of creatine, can put that intra-workout, post-workout. And again, for a field sport athlete as well, there will be massive benefits from a strength and power and performance standpoint with a creatine supplement. But for somebody training in the gym, guys, your timing is going to be very, very similar. Again, it's going to go back to the person, body fat percentage. If they're carrying high levels of body fat and your goal is to preserve muscle mass, potentially you would need as much carbohydrates intra. So if you were kind of going around the preface of 25 grams intra, and then having some pre-carbs and post-carbs, should be absolutely fine for you. The main thing with training in the gym is you want to preserve muscle tissue. You want to make sure your body's performing at its best. So the important thing for training there for somebody will always be hydration levels, guys, both for somebody in the gym and in field sports. So again, we have to look at when we play field sports, the prevalence of having adequate hydration is so important. Same when you're training in the gym. A hydrated muscle performs better. And if we're taking on some creatine, that creatine is going to pull water into cell. And we know that the body's made up of about 45 to 75% water in total, depending on the person, depending on the size. So it's really important you understand that when it comes to your performance. Hydration plays a massive role. And we know that carbohydrates need water to pull them carbs into cell, because water pulls every gram of carbohydrate you ingest. There's about 3.5 grams of water that's pulled into cell with the carbohydrates. So it's really important that you're hydrated along with your carbohydrates coming in. So it's really important, guys, you do that. But when it comes to gym sessions, it all depends on the person, where the body type is, what kind of body fat percentage they have. And again, if they're in an off-season period, they can take that extra bit of carbohydrates just to aid that recovery. If you're somebody that's going into a prep or a show, and you are cutting back on carbohydrates, potentially you want to be starting to look at preserving muscle mass and lean tissue, because as you start to diet down, you're decreasing body fat and you're getting leaner. So the risk of actually eating away at lean muscle mass, lean tissue, is getting higher. So the risk is going up. So intra carbs can come in very, very important, or can be very important there. So it's just down to kind of planning that out as you go. But kind of the preface of this podcast was kind of to talk about field sports and the importance of carbohydrates for a certain type of athlete. And again, if you've got a position in a field and you're a goalkeeper, you're not doing as much. Do you require a lot of carbohydrates? Not necessarily. If you're in the back line and you're not covering an awful lot of space, do you need as much carbohydrates? So it can be very individual to the person and the position they're playing on the pitch. That is really important to take into account too. But the important thing in the kind of the thought process I want you to get from this is, you have to fuel performance and you have to fuel recovery. So these two go hand in hand. It isn't just you fuel performance and you forget about recovery. And a lot of the time when we talk to athletes, when they finish their games or finish their whatever sport they're doing, they kind of forget about it and just go about the rest of their evening. You need to really think about this. The recovery aspect of post-game, post-whatever, is so important, if not more important, because what you want to do is you want to be in the game, you want your energy to be super high, you want your speed and power to be there, you want your recovery capacity to be really, really good within that session. And then when you finish, you want to make sure that your body can recover. So we have to recover muscle glycogen stores is the most important things, because remember, the stored energy within the muscle is called muscle glycogen. And when we're training and we're using all that energy, so we're pulling that out of muscle. So we need to replenish that. Remember, we want to repair muscle. We want to get stronger, fitter, faster. So we're going to have adequate protein coming in. We're going to replenish that stores the muscle glycogen from carbohydrate intake. So post-workout carbohydrates, so important. Post-workout hydration, so important to get the body back. So replenish muscle glycogen stores, adequate protein to aid that pathway of repair. Remember, we're tearing muscle fibers when we train, so we need to repair that pathway so the muscle can come back stronger than it was before. And we also need to make sure we hydrate to make sure the body is getting back its hydration levels, because if you play a game, for instance, and you're out in the field for 70 minutes, you could have lost up to 2 kilos of water. And you need to replenish that. So that's what you need to be thinking. So a simple strategy there was, you could weigh yourself pre-game and then weigh yourself post-game and see what the difference is in weight, and then fill in the blanks there with water. So for most people, when they come off the pitch, 2 liters of water to 2.5 liters of water should be adequate enough to get them back. A simple little trick there, guys, for hydration as well, you can do is get some coconut water, get a little bit of table salt, and if you want to add in some branched chain amino acids into it, you could. And basically from the coconut water, the table salt, you're getting a very good potassium-sodium balance, and that's what we want. We want to bring our pH up in our body. So you're getting a nice balance of potassium, a nice balance of sodium, and that's a very good hydration strategy drink to use post-game. So it's a nice one. So you could have a liter of water, half of it is coconut water, pinch of salt, the rest is water, mix it up and take it. And that could be a very, very good recovery strategy you could have, and it's easily implemented and something that's going to really aid you, because because a lot of the time when people play games and go into the gym and stuff like that, they're really sore after our training sessions. It normally is down to not adequate amount of protein going in post, not an adequate amount of carbohydrates going in post, and hydration levels aren't where they should be, and that can cause the DOMS effect, or the onset of muscle soreness that you're going to be getting over and over and over again. Again, these biofeedback markers, you're looking at this and you're saying, I'm not recovering from sessions. What's my water intake like? What's my carbohydrate timing like post training, intra training? What's my protein intake like around that window? This is really important. So we have to look at carbohydrate timing in its bigger form and the most important factors. So we have to fuel performance, guys, and we have to fuel our recovery sessions are so important. So again, I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave you some insight into maybe a bit of carbohydrate timing for you. And remember the numbers we're talking about, between 3 grams to 7 grams per kilo of body weight, depending on the person, depending on the size. And again, the requirement for intra-carbohydrates during your session is dictated by the person, the physical appearance of the person. Have they a lower fitness level, maybe not as active in their training sessions, or not hitting as many sessions in the week, and maybe a higher level of body fat, the requirement for intra-carbohydrates is a little bit less there. And then for somebody that's leaner, high level of fitness, low level of body fat, high level of activity, training 4 to 6 times per week, the requirement for carbohydrate is going to be much higher to preserve that lean tissue. Remember, the muscle you have is what you want to keep and grow and make stronger, fitter, faster, not lose, and not having your body eating away at that because it's not getting adequate energy from food. So really important, guys, you think about that. So again, thanks a million for listening to another episode of Reach Your Peak Podcast. Any questions, comments, guys, please just drop them down below in the comment box. And again, if you have anything you need me to talk about or anything you would like me to discuss in further podcasts, please drop them into the comment box down below as well. That would be greatly appreciated, and I will absolutely get on that for you as well. So again, next week we have a guest, so we're looking forward to that. We've got Callum Ratchford from the Muscle Mentors in the UK coming on, talking about everything to do with training, everything to do with dieting, everything to do with prepping, everything to do with just general coaching, male and female. So it's going to be a very interesting podcast, very deep dive into all to do with coaching male and female athletes, wherever your goal may be. So something for you to look forward to, guys, and to tune in. So again, have a fantastic week. Hope everybody is absolutely smashing their goals. Hope everybody is feeling good at this time of the year. And again, we're delighted. We're seeing a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel here now, guys. So we're getting back. The gyms hopefully will be open soon. We'll all be back on the gym floor, really smashing our goals, really looking at something for the rest of the year. So remember, get your goal setting started now. You have 6 months left. Really important that you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, what can I do in these remaining 6 months of 2021, and put a stamp on it for myself that I can finish the year and say, you know what, I achieved something really special this year that I thought I never could. And again, the only limitations are in your mind, guys. That's the key thing. That you're limited by your imagination, by what you think you can do. So like Henry Ford said, I think if you think you can't, you're probably right. And don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure was it him that said that, but it's a fantastic quote, and I have that written in the gym. If you think you can't, you're probably right. So if you think you can, you're probably right too. And that's the most important thing. So guys, so have a great week and absolutely smash your goals this week. And thanks a million for listening to another episode of Reach Your Peak Podcast with your host, Bobby Enright.